All right, for today, I'm going to talk about something I like talking about, or at least thinking about. I just don't say it out loud. Uh, Chinese medicine. And I find that it helps me make sense of some random symptoms. Some people have various concerns, and they're like, well, this hurts, and then that hurts, and then that turns yellow. And I don't know why that's happening. And I'm like, though they're all related. And they're like, that makes zero sense. And I'm like, here, let me show you. And then I'll start asking all these weird questions. And they're like, this doesn't make any sense at all. And then eventually they get it. And they're like, whoa, everything's connected. And it's like, yeah, there you go. Now you see it. And bless Chinese medicine, because it's been around for a long, long, long time ago. And it just makes sense. And they have, without getting into the very specific details of it, I like to keep it general, because not everyone, this isn't like a course in it. And the truth is, I don't want people to be like, oh, I learned everything I need to know about Chinese medicine in this video. I'm like, that's stupid. And, but I just want to like introduce the ideas and a really, really rough shot approach to it, so that people are like, oh, I kind of get the gist of it. If you want to learn more, study it, go to school for it, or buy a book, or see an acupuncturist, or talk to someone else that knows about this stuff. The simplest way to look at Chinese medicine is literally the symbol of the yin and the yang. Everyone says it wrong. Yin, yang, all this stuff. And there's so many levels and layers. Let's just keep it light. It has to do with like a balance between extremes, up, down, hot, cold, in, out, all that stuff. And really, Chinese medicine points out the desire to regulate and have balance, almost like in a binary sense, where you can't have one organ working in an extreme and another organ working in a deficient state, because really the idea that they all work together to perform specific functions. Now, let's take the stomach, for example. So when you eat, it's not just your stomach. You've got your mouth, you got this tube here, esophagus, you got your stomach, you got enzymes, you got your pancreas, your gallbladder, and your liver, putting in their 2 cents, and then the intestines, the small and the large, and then that's just elimination. And then there's all this stuff that happens with like absorption of nutrition, and what organs are responsible for taking in vitamins and which ones are responsible for building up the blood. So a simplistic way of looking at it is related to 5-element theory, meaning all the functions of the body can be divided into 5 key organs. All right, don't mess this up. Heart, kidney, liver, lung, spleen. Yeah, I think that sounds right. People will be like, no, it's not correct. I'm like, it's fine. It's fine for this video. When I do it with my patients, I do it more accurately. People will be like, well, the spleen doesn't do anything. And it's like, on the contrary. It's like, well, you can remove your spleen, you function. It's like, well, yes. And that's why we say the functions of the body are divided into like streams. And those 5 organs sort of act like the mayor of all those responsibilities, and they all have to work together. One organ system isn't necessarily more important than the other, and removing your spleen doesn't mean that you lose the properties and traits of the spleen functions. Wow. So I already confused a lot of people. That's okay. So if there is an issue with digestion, you can address it almost with any one of those organs, oddly enough. Let's say that someone gets bloated. So that's probably a spleen thing, especially if it's upper digestion. But if it's lower, it could be intestine. It could be, so that would be more of a lung issue. And they're like, how does the lung have to do with your being bloated? So this is when you start further dissecting and understanding that different organs have a paired organ that they work with. Again, not to get into too many details, but the one good example I like using is the lung and the large intestine. They are a paired organ. So they kind of feed off each other. And there is a functional and realistic experience of this that I see, and I use it to treat my patients, and that would be eczema, for example. Because a lot of times people will come in, and this is a skin condition on the surface. So a lot of people are getting stuff to treat it topically. And then I'm like, nope, you got to cut out your dairy and probably your gluten. And then they'll be like, I was never told that I don't have any issues. No one ever said that. And I'm like, try it. And then what happens? Eczema starts getting better. So it's like, well, make the connection. How does that help? Is it an allergic reaction and then allergies come out through the skin? So, sort of. A little bit like that. The lung is like a manifestation of our immune system. So there is a very simple or superficial concept of like when you get sick, you get a respiratory thing. You ever wonder why? It's like, well, the mucus is there. And it's like, well, why do you get mucus there? Why don't you get rectal mucus if you have a cold? Well, no, because I inhaled germs. And I'm like, if that's what you think happened, well, now I'm making you all be like, oh, what's he saying? I'm like, that's a story for that's another video. Anyways, let's just keep it simple. Your lungs regulate your immunity. Now, if you're eating something and in your large intestine, there is a reaction, an inflammatory state because your tummy didn't do a good job breaking something down, or there's these antibodies being formed, who's going to fix that? Where do those antibodies go? Are they just in your intestines? Do you poop them out? Not necessarily. Do they go into your circulation? Now you're starting to see how these things come out through your skin. Slowly you're starting to see it. Let it sink in. So the lung, the large intestine, and your skin actually form a triad. Now these things are getting really complicated. And all the organs do this. There's lots of conditions that are like, well, there's this thing, and then there's this one, and then they're working together, and they're trying to fix something, and they're borrowing energy from over here. And Chinese medicine happens. So backing up a little bit, I actually like the 5-element concept because it helps with understanding emotions and how emotions impact your health, believe it or not. The simplest example, the most basic and straightforward, is getting hangry. And I like asking people that because now that there's that Snickers commercial, it has normalized that idea, and people actually can have a tangible understanding of like, oh, yeah, I am like that, or so and so. If they don't eat and they're getting hungry, they start getting really, really cranky. Why is that? Well, it's because it's their liver. Their liver is the organ that manages anger. It would even be said that it could store anger or exhibit or express or create anger or frustration. And so if the liver is trying to regulate your blood sugar and it's having difficulty, there's a constrained emotion that's being emoted. Believe it or not. That's just one example. Let's come up with another example. The spleen. The spleen has to do with worry. And I tell my patients, am I blurry? Or is that my eyes? I guess I'm okay. That's my liver. liver dysfunction. I'm angry at my video. So my eyes went crossed. Spleen and worry. The spleen is responsible for pensiveness, overthinking. If you are a thinker, guess what? Spoiler alerts. Your digestion will be compromised. How does that work? Well, I like using the example of like fight or flight. If you are over worried, overstimulated, stressed, anxious, agitated, you're in fight or flight, sympathetic overdrive, which is the opposite of rest and digest, the parasympathetic state. So if you are agitated, your tummy is not ready for food. It's going to take a while. And your spleen, which is like in charge of that, will be like, I'm busy with my focus up here, or physically feeling angst, agitated, all that. But my tummy and my digestive process, my healing process, my resting phase is not getting actuated. It's not getting turned on. So I'm going to have issues with digestion because my brain doesn't shut off. When I tell people, when you eat, everything goes away. Worries, thoughts, phones, this, work, off. Separate yourself. That's why there's a lunchroom or a kitchen. Deep thoughts. What else is there? Now, the idea of acupuncture being a tool for Chinese medicine, that's a whole other kind of like, well, where did that come from? And how does that even make sense? And why? What are these sticking needles? Are they trigger points? Are they make-believe? Is it just intuitive, like you randomly kind of... No. Each point, there's standard points. There's more than what I'm about to say, but generally speaking, there's 360 standard organ points. There are more, and there are other acupuncture systems. I'm more referring to traditional Chinese acupuncture. And there are what's called meridians, which are like chains of invisible channels of energy that the acupuncture points all lie across. And you've seen probably those, like they look like ivory dummies it's a male anatomy, and it's got all the points and connected. And that's each organ. There's I think that the 12 major organs, the yin and the yang organs, they have various numbers of points. Some have more, some have less. And they virtually map over almost the entire body. Front, back, arms, leg, tummy, head, everything covered. And so you got to know all those points. Not all the points are as useful. Some of them are really, really critical. A lot of them are like if you go for acupuncture regularly, you'll probably see some of the similar points being hit when each time you go in, or that other people who've had acupuncture be like, yeah, they put one or here. That's a biggie, very common. I like this one. This one bleeds. This one's called yin tang. I think technically that's an extra point. That's not one of the typical organ points. But this one here is to calm the mind. Now, I have my own little scale, my own self-developed scale of like how much that point might bleed. Now, it's very uncommon that acupuncture points bleed because you're really not going that deep. It's very superficial still. The gauge of the needle is very thin. It doesn't hurt. Don't be a suck. But this one here, I usually use it for people that overthink. And guess what happens? When it bleeds, it's like a relief valve letting off steam. And a little bit of blood. If it's a drop of blood, I say it's like a level 1. That's nothing. If it's like, oh, I wipe it away and then another drop comes out, level 2. Level 3 is like when I got to rush to get a tissue and just like, oh, hold it there. And it's kind of, a couple drops. Then it's gone. Level 4s are the best. That happens like once a year. When and the person's still lying down, I'll take the needle out and I see it, and it's like, before you know it, it's like tripling down their face. I'm like, you better chill out. Your brain is about to be fried. So many thoughts. They don't realize it until they realize it. And then they're like, yeah, I kind of think I do have a problem. And then afterwards, sometimes it's like a relief. It's a relief valve. Let the steam out. Let the craziness go. And so the acupuncture points themselves, they are drops in electrical potential. So they are measurable. There is something called a galvanometer. Often it's just kind of like called a point finder. And it's like this little metal probe, and you're like running, and it's like beep, 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 beep. It's like a metal detector idea. And wherever there's the biggest drop in electrical potential, that's the point. And so you're putting a metal needle in that little conductive spot. And what I say, it's like connecting the circuit. If you have like a little short circuit, the wires are broken, the needle kind of acts sort of theoretically as like a reconnecting wire and allows this conductive energy to continue to move. So think of them like veins, but they're not physical, and it's not blood that it's necessarily moving. The points can move blood throughout the body. It can, and energy. That's the chi. That's another other story. But essentially what it's doing is sending this circulating force through the organs and reestablishing their proper function. It's like there's a little blueprint, and you're going back to the blueprint. It's like, you're not doing this. You have to keep doing this process, sending juices here and there and whatever. People start feeling better. It's not in their head. It's actually improving circulation. It's balancing things off. If someone's got too much stimulation in their head, it's like, man, I have so much going on up here. I feel like my head's going to pop off. Do some points up here. And what's going to happen is that all this stimulation is starting to come down. They'll actually feel like it's kind of like, I don't know, it just feels like kind of like something kind of like dropping. Other people that are very sluggish, you actually do the bottom of their foot, and it kind of like, it's like, oh, I actually kind of got a little bit of a, sticking something in the bottom of your foot is going to wake you up anyways. But in actuality, it's pushing up this energy that has dropped. Another good example has to do with someone that there's this balance of yin and yang, and especially when it comes to thinking and over-analysis. I use a nice example of like a helium balloon, a party balloon, and it's got a weight. Now, it has to have a weight, because if you didn't have it, it would flow away. And that floating, like if you cut that weight and you see the balloon floating off, think of someone that the brain is just running a mile a minute there. They could be manic. They can be like a catastrophizing situation where they're like blowing things up and they can't control their thoughts and their mind is running away with them. I would say that's yang overload, and there's not enough yin. Now, what does that mean? Now, a lot of these people that they have this excessive thoughts, they don't have enough nutritional weight to them. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean they're mass, because they can be overweight, but they can also be lacking yin. Yin is nutrition. Yin is rich blood. Yin is protein. It could be like, think of it as like muscle versus fat. Fat is a little bit more yang. Now, someone who is either low muscle mass or low body weight, or even if they're a little bit like anemic or undernourished, their mental state can become a little bit erratic. They're not grounded. That's really the best word to use. Nutrition grounds your mind. Without sufficient nutrition, you can have episodes. And that's one of the things you have to be careful with, because sometimes people, when they're like, I guess I'm having a psychotic episode. I'm going manic. It's like, yes, there's a pre-existing condition, but you can have stability, and you can reduce reoccurrences, and stable and consistent nutrition acts to counter some of the triggers for those experiences. Now, that was a very, 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 very brief crash course in my use of Chinese medicine with my patients. I will probably do more of these, but maybe a little bit more targeted and specific, going into the nitty gritty of different organs, because I think it's good to know, good for the public to understand some of the background of Chinese medicine and why it's so powerful. It helps make sense of random symptoms. It helps explain what the organs are doing and how they interrelate. It helps explain the effect or the role that emotions have in symptomology. It also helps clarify, in some senses, the use of food as medicine and how different food qualities can enhance or impair an organ's function. So stay tuned. Where's my off button? There it is.